Check. I think I'm going to test my levels now, and it seems quite alright. Hey everyone, first of all, do my bangs make sense? No, I cut them myself, so let's move on. Next, we're going to start a series called Books. I don't know. It's going to feature excerpts from some books that I like and that I think other people should read. I'm not an avid reader. I'm a very slow reader, and sometimes it's just downright homework for me in order to get through a book. But every once in a while, I'm proud of myself because I finished it, and now I want to share what I'm reading with other people. And we're going to start this with The Deficit Myth by Stephanie Kelton. And I really like this book. It presented some economic theory that I hadn't heard before and that makes a lot of sense to me. This came out in 2020, and I had pre-ordered it because I saw an interview with her talking about the book and her background and her research on it. And I really liked some of the things she had to say. I've been taught more traditional, some would say outdated ideas of economics, macroeconomics, and what we tie the dollar to, because I would find myself sitting in macroeconomics hearing, I could understand what I was hearing, but I didn't understand why. Some of the things didn't add up to me. There were a lot of assumptions being made by some models of economics that there had to be certain groups of people that would just keep chugging along as is. There wasn't a lot of mobility from group to group financially, or else the system wouldn't continue. And that was okay. So, yeah, she speaks to that in this. It does present some answers, but it also says these are just some ideas to bring to the table, and it welcomes other ideas. It does not claim to be the only solution to some of the economic issues that we face. I'm going to read some excerpts from this book, and I recommend that you order it and read it and consider it for yourself. There were some concepts in this book that I had just never heard of before, such as a currency issuer versus a currency user. The federal government is a currency issuer, and the states and municipalities and we are currency users. We don't issue it, but we use it. The federal government issues it. Makes perfect sense now that you think about it, but before it had been presented to me in plain language like that, it just hadn't occurred to me that different entities have different relationships to currency. And then this idea of currency sovereignty or financial sovereignty of different nation states. The US is sovereign. There are other countries that aren't. Countries that use the euro are not monetarily sovereign. And that limits them in some of the ways they can finance programs in their country. So let's get to it. Yes, I highlighted because I'm a dork. Page 17. MMT, that's modern monetary theory. MMT takes as its starting point a simple and incontrovertible fact. Our national currency, the US dollar, comes from the US government, and it can't come from anywhere else, at least not legally. Both the US Treasury and its fiscal agent, the Federal Reserve, have the authority to issue the US dollar. Plain language. Love it. Only the federal government can issue our currency. Everyone else is merely a currency user. The distinction between currency users and currency issuer lies at the heart of MMT. To take full advantage of the special powers that accrue to the currency issuer, countries need to do more than just grant themselves the exclusive right to issue the currency. It's also important that they don't promise to convert their currency into something they could run out of, for example, gold, or some other country's currency. And they need to refrain from borrowing, taking on debt, in a currency that isn't their own. That's different from debt in your own currency. When a country issues its own non-convertible fiat currency and only borrows in its own currency, that country has attained monetary sovereignty. Countries with monetary sovereignty then don't have to manage their budgets as a household would. They can use their currency issuing capacity to pursue policies aimed at maintaining a full employment economy. Now here's the distinction. When countries with little or no monetary sovereignty fail to prioritize, someone is vacuuming. We're gonna proceed through this vacuuming. Vacuuming is a lovely thing. It's very therapeutic. I'm gonna include it. Let's go. When countries with little or no monetary sovereignty fail to prioritize budget discipline, they can face unsustainable debts, just like a household. In contrast, the United States never has to worry about running out of money. It can always pay the bills, even the big ones. The US cannot end up like Greece, which gave up its monetary sovereignty when it stopped issuing its own currency in order to use the euro. America is not dependent on China or anyone else for financing. Most importantly, having monetary sovereignty means that a country can prioritize the security and well-being of its people without needing to worry about how to pay for it. We've been trained, this is page 21, we've been trained to believe that, like each of us, the government must find the money before it can spend. Then everyone becomes obsessed with the question, how are you going to pay for it? We've been conditioned to expect our elected officials to offer a blueprint that maps out the source of every new dollar they wish to spend. Even the most progressive candidates fear that they'll be eaten alive if their proposals add to the deficit, so borrowing is almost never an option. In practice, the federal government almost never collects enough taxes to offset all of its spending. Deficit spending is the norm, and everyone in Washington, D.C. knows it. Now this one really got to me. This excerpt really hit home for me. It kind of hit a nerve. Page 23. We probably believe that the government needs our money to help pay the bills. We might even feel a little bit patriotic about the check we send off to the IRS every April. Proud to have done our small part in building low-income housing, paying our men and women in uniform, and supporting our farmers with generous subsidies. That was me. I hate to be the bearer of uncomfortable news, but that's not what's actually happening. If you're not already doing so, you should probably sit down. Are you ready? Your taxes don't actually pay for anything, at least not at the federal level. The government doesn't need our money. We need their money. We've got the whole thing backwards. Now she goes on to explain in detail why this is so, but I'm not going to read it to you because, well, this is her intellectual property, and I really think you should read the book, invest in people's work like this, give them a few dollars, give them some time to present their case to you and see what you think. And you can disagree with every word she says, and that's okay. But it is food for thought. She has really cool bucket analogies here for budget buckets, and that really helped me in very plain language understand that if money isn't here, it's here, and if it's taken from here, it can only go here. And it just presented in plain English. It just presented in plain English concepts that I otherwise would find too lofty to even attempt to understand. And I'm not always able to re-articulate it to people, which is part of the reason why I'm recommending everyone read this if you're able. It's interesting. You might not agree with everything she says, but that's all right. There is one other part I would like to read. Rather than thinking of the national deficit as a risk, Stephanie Kelton does present the real danger of overspending, because there are some, and she's not naive to that. So she does speak to this, and I'll just read a little bit here. So why not tell Congress to just keep spending until all our problems are solved? If only it were that easy. Inflation, the subject of our next chapter, is a real danger. To be clear, MMT is not about removing all limits. It's not a free lunch. It's about replacing our current approach, one obsessed with budget outcomes, with one that prioritizes human outcomes, while at the same time recognizing and respecting our economy's real resource constraints. Now, there is a section where she discusses real resource constraints, and that is materials that you have to produce goods, or employees, people power that you have to produce services. Those do have constraints on them. If there aren't enough people, there aren't enough people. You can have too many jobs and not enough people. So those are real constraints that she speaks to in this book. She also speaks about a federal jobs guarantee and how it will raise the level of jobs available when there is a shortage in the private sector, and it will lower when more people are being hired off into the private sector. And it will incentivize that so that people don't feel like they have to choose one or the other. All right, so the battery died on my mic, but that's okay. So check it out. It's a really good read. It's a really easy read. She even speaks to that in this book. I really had fun reading it, and it felt like she had fun writing it. I think she's really passionate about economics, and she just wants to educate other people and open up the table for discussion. So check it out when you get a chance. All right, I will see you next time.